It's quite atmospheric.
It is atmospheric. So guys, hello and welcome to Hopper HQ's first trending panel session. We kind of, at Hopper HQ, we kind of wanted to do more fun things and more events. And we did a great drinks meetup and kind of thought, wouldn't that be cool to extract all of the insight that we got from people in the room? So this is it. I hope it's useful. Tonight we have an esteemed panel of experts. Do they look esteemed? Yeah. Uh-oh. We basically have everybody or all areas covered of content marketing. So we have the publisher, we have the brand, and we have the agency. We also have different perspectives, whether that be from big businesses, from the agency there, or whether it be through small businesses. And we also have different perspectives on what actually content marketing is, and whether or not it's actually useful for us. So firstly, a massive thanks for WeWork for hosting us, and also for the gin and tonic, which was drunk mostly as water. Again, I'm very sorry about that. So the main thing, actually, as well as the amazing panel here, which I will let speak shortly, trust me, we were totally overwhelmed by people being interested in this event, for one. So we have a range of agency CEOs in the room to people who work in corporate who actually just care about content marketing and want to get involved. So as a result of that, we thought it would be more interesting to have, yes, the panel discussion, but involve you guys as much as possible. So you'll see that you have a bit of blue and a bit of yellow paper. I've called these our contention cards, or contentious cards. And basically, as if it's not more difficult enough being on a panel, we are using the cards as a I agree or I disagree. You can use them as you like, whenever you like, however much you like throughout the evening. So let's agree that blue is agree and yellow is disagree. So if Nick, for example, is saying something that is just wrong, what are we going to do? Yeah, oh yes. So if you see that, guys, it's time to leave. So we're going to do a bit of practice on that. So coffee is much better than tea. Okay, we've got largely a coffee room. Okay, this is a cool one. When you've opened a bottle of tomato ketchup, you have to store it in the fridge and not the cupboard. Ooh, with fridges. A few cupboard, well okay, about a third cupboard. Obviously dark chocolate always better than white. Thank you very much, we can be friends, maybe this side of the room. We've also got dogs are better than cats. Oh, yes, we know. And finally, the chicken came before the egg. Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. That's perfect. Okay, guys, so that's enough. That's enough from me. We're going to move on to our panel. So I'm so pleased to be joined right next to me here by Nick Willis. Nick is the EMEA head of branded distribution at Buzzfeed. He's promised me he will talk more about how cute cats are and how they found the internet. And he's also said he'll talk in more than the 5 bullet-pointed lists that we all know and love from Buzzfeed. Next to Nick, we have Sam Jones from Inkpact. The eagle-eyed amongst you might know that Sam Knowles from Outbrain has morphed into Sam Jones from Inkpact. We thought we could get away with that. But Sam, unfortunately, the other Sam, unfortunately, has to be in Amsterdam today. But fortunately for us, yes, Sam Jones from Inkpact, she has so many different perspectives to content marketing that I won't spoil the story. But she actually works for Inkpact, which is a handwritten letter company, working for lots of different brands. She also does content marketing for Inkpact, and she's done loads of stuff from writing songs, promoting radio stations, to actually rebranding the town of Wrexham through content marketing. So look forward to hearing about that. And finally, on the end here, we have Mr. Craig Watt. Craig is an account director at Geometry by JWT, so he actually has a really valuable perspective on content marketing, but in the wider remit of marketing in general. Are we ready? Does it sound like we're here for the right reasons? Good. Let's do it. Oh yeah, I like the blue. I like the blue. So just to, and you can do show of hands rather than blue. Who here actually works in content marketing? Cool. Who here doesn't know what content marketing is? Amazing. And who here doesn't think content marketing is valuable? Oh, we're going to go. Okay, so we're going to go along the panel, and if you could just briefly introduce yourself and what your perspective is, or your definition of what content marketing actually is.
Hi, I'm Nick, I work at Buzzfeed. As Mike said, I work, or I lead the branded distribution team within Buzzfeed. And how I would define, or how Buzzfeed would define content marketing is I think that we often view it as, I guess, the coming together of a brand and a publisher, in the way that the brand is often there to sell a product or a service, and the publisher or the influencer have a really strong connection with the audience. So actually by bringing those two parties together, it allows you to tap into actually the story that the brand is trying to tell, but in a way that is relatable and you know will appeal to the audience.
Cool, thank you.
Hello, I'm Samantha Jones, not the one from Sex and the City. And I work for Inkpact, and we send handwritten notes on behalf of big companies, because no one can resist a handwritten note, so it's 100% overrated. And I don't know, for my definition of content marketing, it's like storytelling, so promoting something but not directly promoting it, and finding a way to create a conversation with the audience instead of it just being a one-way conversation, like here's a product and that's it.
Hello, my name's Craig. I work for Geometry JWT. It's a big agency that essentially specialises in looking at the entire path to purchase and then looking for points of influence along that path to purchase to actually change a behaviour or get an action out of people. My perspective on what great content, or what content marketing actually is essentially it's a discipline of looking to seed in a brand or a product message into a piece of content. It's hard to define content marketing without saying content. Into a piece of content in a very, very subtle way where you're borrowing from the actual equity of that subject. But the key thing is that it's really important for that piece of content to have a benefit for the audience and the viewer. So what are they getting out of it? Are they getting information, inspiration, or is it just entertainment? It can't purely be about the brand's message.
Brilliant, thank you. I didn't see any yellows in there, so that was good on the definitions. So actually, the more we've researched into content marketing, the more we realise that actually content marketing has just been around for ages. And we would come across Maxwell House, the big coffee brand, actually started doing content marketing in some form or another back in 1836 and so much more. But we all kind of appreciate that it's changed so much in the last few years. So Nick, how would you say, from a Buzzfeed perspective, you've seen content marketing change over the last 1 to 3 years?
Yeah, I think it's changed a lot. I think that it's something that has always been a bit of an R&D function within the media plan. And I think that it has grown into something that is a bit more established through better tracking, better verification, viewability, things like that, that have allowed it to grow within that sort of marketing area. But I think, traditionally a lot of people think about content marketing in the same way they do about their display activity or their search activity, in that goal is awareness, reach, or conversions. And actually at Buzzfeed we try and understand that, but sit somewhere in between, because there's a lot in between those two things. And so we've started to think more about content in how, in actually the job that it serves, right? So less about is it driving an impression or is it driving a click, but actually what job or what purpose is that content actually serving? And a few of the things that we like to think about are, we generally categorize our content into identity, emotion, or information. And we feel that putting content into those buckets and thinking about that really allows you to connect with that audience in a way beyond impressions, clicks, and conversions.
Are we going down the panel?
We don't have to, but I did like the delegation that you all just showed. So we've seen it. So you've seen it change in terms of you've almost bucketed it into these things that stand behind it. But from an industry perspective, well, I suppose from a brand perspective, have you seen how content marketing can be more valuable or less valuable? What is the actual value from your perspective?
Yeah, okay, so I think going back to what I said before, like conversation is the biggest thing, because like everybody has got something to say, and finding out how you can create that conversation with people, whether it's like just experimenting on Instagram or doing some videos. Like, you start to know very quickly what does and doesn't work if you're monitoring your analytics and stuff. And I really think it's good to just be so not close to what you're actually trying to promote, like get into the emotion behind whatever it is. There was a probiotic brand that really just wanted to get out to people the type of brand that they were and make a connection and actually tell people what they did, but they couldn't state their actual their health benefits. So we sort of created a community on the side where we could interact with people and get them sharing their health tips and getting them sharing what they were eating and stuff like that. And it's absolutely indirectly related to the probiotic, but everybody's got something to say about what's on their plate. Simple as that. So we ended up building a community of healthy eaters and people that had like issues that a probiotic would sort. So, and the conversation grew, and it's still growing. So
that's an example of building a community through content. Craig, on the bigger side of businesses, in terms of the real established brands, what did you see the value of content marketing more on brand awareness or tactical driven, like driving to sales, or is it?
I mean, to a certain extent, it depends on the brief in terms of what your objective for that brief actually is. What we're tending to find actually is when we're working with big brands, they're constantly looking for new growth drivers. And so that growth driver might be a new use occasion for that product or service. And as a result, what we're essentially trying to do is align or prime people to start thinking about that product for a different occasion, for example. And content marketing is working really, really strongly for us when we think about the inspiration stage of someone's path to the purchase. So when you're actually trying to make someone think about that product in line with that new occasion, you can start to subtly seed that in and you're priming them to think about that. So at the moment, that's where we're starting to see it really working from an awareness point of view, but also I think really great effective content marketing is when you're looking at the conversion side of things. So when you're starting to try and push people down that purchase funnel, it's all about content that converts, which is slightly easier from an e-commerce point of view. However, it can be very much harder when you're looking at analog purchases, because the closer you get to that point of purchase, from an analog purchase point of view, it becomes much more hard to actually get people engaging with that content near there. So therefore, you actually need to find about how can you get people converting further up that purchase funnel. Take a consumer packaged goods or FMCG, a soft drinks brand, for example. You need to think very earlier on in the journey in terms of how do you actually get someone to perform an action.
Very good. And Nick, do you have a different perspective on that, whether it's brand awareness or whether it's tactical sales? Or where's its core?
No, I think a lot of what Craig said, we definitely follow that path as well. I think that it's I wouldn't silo it necessarily into either of those two different things. I actually think that the two, brand awareness versus conversion are probably more interlinked today than they ever have been. I think that distance between brand awareness, building an audience, understanding information, and then driving through to that conversion. In the past, you viewed that as, you research the product, you learn about it via a TV ad, you go and watch a video about it on YouTube, and then you search for it and you buy that product. That just doesn't happen today. I think that the trends that we're seeing based on user behavior is more that actually people are far more comfortable now purchasing products via their social networks because they're scared to leave them. And actually, I think perhaps it's potentially outweighed in terms of investment with advertising dollars, in that a lot of people will outweigh the last click attribution. And in doing so, search is obviously favourable on a media plan, but in reality, what you're seeing is these platforms, and talk about Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, really tooling themselves up to actually do a much better job of driving that conversion. So what that means is, those platforms that we as a publisher are operating on, and frankly, the strength of our distributed network is really where we build our value. Really gives you a really strong opportunity to build that awareness, but actually to drive that conversion in a sort of much faster and much more streamlined opportunity than perhaps you used to.
Now, I know you're limited to discussing specific brands, but do you have any examples of where that's potentially changed in terms of
Yeah.
things you've seen?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm not allowed to name names, but we worked with an alcohol brand very recently on a Tasty video. So Tasty is a food channel on Facebook that I hope some of you have probably heard of.
Blue if you know it, yellow if you don't.
That's what you do. Okay. Okay. Well, it's a Facebook page. You should check it out. It's got loads of food recipes. We sort of pioneered the top-down, short-form food recipe, and it is a platform that was built entirely from our Facebook page, completely separate to our website. And we've grown it into a really interesting channel and products that we're able to not just build an editorial voice from, but actually to monetize that as well. So the work that we did with this alcohol brand, we essentially said, how can we target the 18+ audience who are interested in drinking cocktails? And obviously there are a number of different ways that you can achieve that via Facebook. But what we're actually finding is that targeting people via passive audience behaviors actually drives a much stronger intent. In that you are targeting someone who hasn't gone onto Facebook and liked cocktails or has liked an alcohol brand, but they are consuming video content on that platform related to that topic. So we know that we're targeting someone based on a cocktail video they watched yesterday as opposed to something they liked on Facebook 8 years ago.
But how much of that is actually just better audience targeting, or is it the fact that you've used the content to understand that depth about the audience? Yeah,
I actually think you can't have one without the other. I actually think that yes, that is down to the depth and the strength of your audience targeting, but the audience you need to build yourself. And I think that what Tasty has done is built a really strong, really engaged audience that we are able to then distribute branded content to. And in this sort of content marketing sphere, it has allowed us to drive a direct response message, but in a very editorial frame. And so users engage with that not like it's an ad, but like it's an editorial piece of content. So, of course, with this alcohol brand, we then had a link, and you click the link and you could buy the recipe from Tesco's, and it drove over 10,000 clicks. And for us, that was a really strong signal to us that people are using social networks to actually convert.
So the more I listen to this, the more we're more likely to put all of our money into Tasty or content.
Good.
But actually, where does this fit into the wider marketing mix? Craig, do you have any thoughts on actually the role of content within bigger campaigns?
I think it was kind of linked to what I was saying before in terms of you really have to define the role, because I think what Nick was saying there was fantastic from a brand awareness point of view, and actually conversion as well, because you're doing that from you're doing that on e-commerce platforms where you can actually track that purchase from the awareness through to the actual conversion, which is fantastic. However, when you consider analog purchases, which for FMCG, I don't know the exact figure, but the majority of FMCG purchases still are analog, you need to find other ways to actually convert people. And as a result, where I'm interested is actually defining the role of content marketing within the overall purchase, but then actually making sure that you're complementing that with other marketing activities as well. Because if you just looked at brand awareness, for example, how can you actually attribute brand preference or awareness to that piece of content marketing? Because you have so many, as a brand, you're probably having lots of other consumer touch points that you're actually talking through. And actually, an adventurous sale may have come from awareness that was driven by one of those other touch points.
So I mean, building a hypothesis of what we said, and I feel like we all like content marketing, as we all do. One could say, okay, well actually, if you can get people on awareness and it builds intent and it shortens funnel, and yes, there's a gap between analog, but we kind of get there eventually for a conversion. Let's just do a blue or yellow, agree or disagree, yes or no. Do we think that you could actually entirely run a brand's marketing just through content marketing? Blue if you think you can, yellow if you think you can. Okay. Okay. That's actually a fair mix, a little bit on the no. So Sam, you have a different perspective because you are in a startup, and you've also worked with smaller businesses. So if we're not sure whether or not content marketing can be the thing, where does that fit in your marketing mix? Where do you put your pounds?
So I think that people really love being showcased. Like they love sort of joining in. So if you can, I'll give you an example. I'll talk about the rebranding Wrexham. If you don't know where Wrexham is, then it's placed in North Wales and it's nicknamed Wrexham. And I'm from there and I love it. And there's a lot of great stuff going on and there's some really cool small businesses going on there and a lot of positive people, but the press around it is terrible. And it generated a very negative conversation about the town. And it got to a point where I just got sick of it. And I thought, I kind of want to just try something that's going to change that tone of voice of the town almost, like rebrand the town. And we decided just in a few weeks to, like all the shops had shut down on the high street because the businesses were closing down. And I knew that there was lots of smaller businesses and freelancers working from home and little startups created at unis. And so we spoke to the tourist, we spoke to the tourist board and the council. And we're like, if you give us a pop-up space just on this high street that you want to generate more interest and change the view of it, we'll set up like a pop-up studio in there and we'll invite the best businesses that aren't getting showcased by the media and aren't getting talked about and they don't have the money to showcase themselves, and we'll just do a week of a show and we'll have like 5 episodes a day, we'll interview these businesses and the angle will all be positive. And so that's exactly what we did. We did like 5 interviews a day. We sort of gamified the interviews to get people to stay watching. So if you wanted to like win a year's supply of cupcakes from the bakers down the road, then you had to like stay watching to find out what to say in the comments. And then people were like, the call to action was share the video, comment below. And it started a conversation. It was like so strong. We ended up reaching like 300,000 people in 5 days. And on the last day, we interviewed a guy called Ben Barlow from Neck Deep. And I actually didn't realise he was famous. And the whole thing went global and I didn't really know what to do because all the comments started flying up in front of the screen and I thought, well, actually it is all about conversation and we've made the audience part of that conversation.
So that's great from it's a great case study from a community and that's essentially a brand perspective.
Yeah.
So taking that experience and put it into your head of marketing at Inkpact, you need to get corporates to buy your product or facilitate that for sales. Where does content marketing sit for you? Do you invest in pay-per-click advertising? Where does that work?
So we're right at the start and we're B2B, so the conversation then changes, like you said, when you've got corporates involved and marketeers that are way more senior than I am. So what we are doing is launching, again, a very similar thing called The Unforgettable Show, where we start interviewing people that are higher up than us and interview them about how they are unforgettable, because that's our motto. If you send a handwritten note, then it stands out more than an email. So that's how we're deciding. We're just going to take the exact same premise and basically interview guests that are way higher up.
Nice. Nick, you said previously that content marketing often comes out of the R&D budget. Is that still the case, or has that changed?
I think that I think it has. I think that for the last couple of years it has always been in the R&D budget because there's an element of risk, and I think that risk is attributed to the value that you're investing into it. And content marketing is not cheap. There are very efficient and very cheap ways to do it, but at the scale that we've experienced, it is expensive to commit creative resources to build up these channels like Tasty. I talk about it like it's just a Facebook page, but we've invested a huge amount into that. And so as a result, there's sometimes some hesitancy towards doing it, and as a result, that's why it falls into the R&D budget, because there are no expectations. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, then don't worry, we'll invest somewhere else. But I do think that there's been a huge amount of movement in terms of transparency and return on advertising spend, that platforms now, and I talk about platforms a lot because we are often reliant on the value of those platforms. These platforms now are actually working so much closer, so much more closely with these third-party verified organisations like Moat, like Nielsen, like dunnhumby, who are really out there to try and prove advertising value. And I think that typically, a lot of platforms haven't done a great job of actually tying that all together. But you're seeing a lot of, perhaps some of the newer social networks that are out there, actually working so much more closely with these partners that allows them to provide that transparency, that verification, viewability that will ultimately move content marketing out of the R&D budget. Because as soon as you can start mapping that attribution model and actually including content marketing in that and showing that it is driving value, it is driving brand lift, I think that one of the challenges we have, right, is that a lot of people measure content marketing on fairly superficial metrics, likes, comments, engagements, views, things like that. But actually you need to start, we've started looking a lot more at actually what impact does that have on the brand? Is that driving lift, recommendation, intent? And it's these third parties like dunnhumby and like Millward Brown who can actually enable that and start looping in your actual brand messaging and that really valuable metric versus those sort of social engagements that are still valuable but won't really move the brand message.
So do you and maybe this is a good question for Craig and the audience, is do you find that people's awareness, that the requirement to get from R&D is almost the marketers saying, look, this is going to work, I just can't prove it by the metrics that you're currently wanting to look at? Would you say that it's an equal weight of the eyeballs and action available on search, for example, as compared to on platforms and through content?
Yeah, again, I think that it is, I think that when people think about content marketing, at least when I do, I often think about social first, in that it can be a very low cost opportunity to distribute content marketing. The issue with that is that when you think about social, you think about these, I keep calling them superficial metrics, but likes, comments, engagements are very good and typically something that a lot of people will define the success of their social campaigns based on those things. But when you're talking to the person that holds the budget, to actually move out of that social area and that sort of that R&D area, you really need to start proving value. And typically, it has been search and display that has done a very good job of proving value. In a very different way, right? The messaging is totally different. The display banners that you see are not relatable, but actually the content marketing that you're seeing is actually engaging with you in a much deeper way. I think we're now just getting to the stage where we can justify that it is driving brand lift. And we have run research studies that shows that someone who's exposed to content marketing is more likely to purchase a product. So we are getting to the point now where I think it is just tipping over, but you will still get the traditional buyers who are still a little bit risk averse.
I think one thing we've seen with the brands that we've worked with as well is that lots of people are almost saying, okay, we understand content marketing is more of a thing, so let's get the people who do the traditional creative, the banner ads, the search, whatever else, and put that on Instagram, and put that on Facebook, and it just doesn't work. So I'm going to put this out as a hypothesis that as the awareness of the understanding of the value of content marketing and the potential ROI, us as content marketers will become more important as a skill set within a marketing organisation. One content marketer says yes. So basically that people are going to need our skill sets more as they know that we can deliver more value. Okay, I guess the people that haven't put a card up are just scared the ones that have are going to maul them, but got it.
No, I hope so, because then we'll all still have a job.
Good. Okay, let's move on very briefly, because I really want to get into the challenges in the future, but very briefly, what makes great content marketing? We can start from that side.
You want to start?
Actually, no, let's start with Sam, if we can. Sorry.
I'm still thinking.
Still thinking? If my opinion on this is very much linked to kind of the definition that I said at the start in terms of what content marketing is. And there has to be a benefit, whether that's inspiration, information, or entertainment, for the end user. And as a result, personally, I think that great content marketing is when the brand message is extremely, extremely subtle. That doesn't mean that you don't have to deal with conversion and things like that. But the more subtle the brand message, the better, because it kind of links into a theory that's been made famous by a guy called Daniel Kahneman at the moment around System 1 and System 2 thinking, where System 1 thinking is when you're kind of in your subconscious, you're in a state of kind of cognitive ease, and as a result, when you're consuming content there, your brand messages are basically coming through to you in a very subtle way, and they're priming your brain to start making positive associations. And I think that's the benefit of content marketing in terms of it can do that in such a subtle way that you don't actually know you're being marketed to, whereas traditional forms of marketing, you are a bit more savvy as a consumer or as an audience in terms of going, that's a marketing message. So in my personal opinion, I think the more subtle that message actually is, the better, because you're not tripping people out into system 2 thinking, which is kind of conscious thought, where you're a bit more switched on and a bit more wary. And as humans, we are inherently lazy, and we kind of rely on our system 1 subconscious thought to constantly draw upon that information to go, actually, yes, this is, I hold that true, which essentially we're priming our brains all the time.
Can we have a blue or a yellow on that? Because that's a really interesting point. Okay.
Blue good.
Yeah.
Blues, they agree with you, you did good.
And the
Now,
favourites
I really want to come on to the audience awareness piece shortly, but actually, when we almost boil down to the fact that we've basically got to market to people when they don't know they're being marketed to, does anyone, blue, yes, yellow, no, feel uncomfortable with that as a content marketer? That actually we're almost manipulating people's thoughts without them knowing? No?
I don't think it's about manipulating.
Okay, I know I'm manipulating others. Okay, same question. We feel uncomfortable with the manipulation of thoughts or subtle marketing as a consumer. Do people feel blue, they feel uncomfortable, yellow, they don't? Okay, same people. Interesting stuff. Sam, what makes, we will come back to this because it's a really interesting point, but what makes great content marketing from your perspective?
I actually think it's about building trust and not trying to look at it from a manipulative, it's the gin, manipulative angle.
Nice water.
Gin, honestly, seriously, I'm gone. Thank you and good night. I think if you take podcasts, they're a really, really good example of how storytelling and building the conversation that matches your brand tone is perfect until we get interrupted by an advert. So actually, I don't know, is anyone here listening to Tim Ferriss' podcast? I really recommend it. Like, some of them, they're really good. And it's just like saved my commute. And actually what it does, it builds Tim Ferriss's brand. Like, he is an incredible presenter and interviewer, and then you get the advert, which is not entirely related to the conversation, and it interrupts, and you suddenly just know, like, I'm being marketed, here's an advert, you know straight away. So actually, podcasts are a great way of building the brand. So if you're a company that can facilitate that, do the podcast, because that's the storytelling, building the conversation, building the community, all of that, and then you're advertising yourself without having to be, you know, manipulative.
Nice. Yeah, I like that. Nick, what makes great content marketing?
I completely agree with Sam. You know, I think that trust is a huge element with content marketing. I think that with Buzzfeed, obviously, we rely on that trust because you are constantly hoping that your audience will engage with the content that you put out there in the same way that a brand would do. But I think that trust is really strong. I think that, you know, when we think about the creative pillars that I was talking about earlier with identity, emotion, and information, those are the things that, you know, I think obviously we have learned, and, you know, we put out about 600 pieces of content every day, so we're constantly learning, and for us, that feedback loop is what makes that content so successful, is that we are able to try. And I think that with social, you do have this unparalleled sort of opportunity to try your different creatives, to try different messages, to build audiences, but to be relatable. I think that's the biggest thing that I've seen, you know, in terms of the campaigns that I've witnessed perform well, are the ones that are relatable. They're not glossy, they're not premium, but they're actually the ads that someone can actually relate to. And so that's why, you know, you think about identity. And, you know, some of our most successful posts have been, you know, 20 things that all short people know to be true. And even if you're not short, you have a short friend. So you will often pass that on to your short friend. So actually, the engagement and actually, you know, reaching that audience is incredible. And what you're doing is you're speaking to someone on a very relatable level, and you're tapping into that job. You know, that job is, this content makes me feel a certain way, it makes me feel happy, sad, it makes me think about my short friend, whatever it might be. But, you know, ultimately that, for us, is a great way to test, you know, that sort of content.
What was the brand message in that?
The brand message, it was for high heel shoes. No, it wasn't actually, it wasn't branded.
It was
that
marketed to me.
was
That's
it.
not-
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got subtle, we've got building trust, and actually relatable. Nice point. So guys, I really want to get into the challenges, and then we look into the future. You picked up on a really cool point there, Craig, about audience awareness, and who here thinks that audience are becoming more and more aware of marketing messages? Blue, yes, yellow, no. Okay, another question. Who here thinks that is a potential challenge for us, or that's a danger for us in content marketing? Difficulty of data. Okay, cool. We're all in agreement. So, Nick, how has audience awareness changed in recent times, and how has that affected what you guys do at Buzzfeed?
Yeah, so I think that you used to sort of be able to write content, and a lot of people still do write content, and perhaps distribute it in a way and market it in a way that it wasn't overly transparent as to who that brand was, and that it was actually a branded piece of content. But in the last 12 months, the Advertising Standards Authority have done a lot in terms of improving that transparency. I think it's a really good thing. I think transparency is really important. I think that actually social platforms have done a really good job of that as well. So for us, a lot of the branded content that we distribute on Facebook, for example, you actually have to tag it now with a brand. So it would be Buzzfeed, UK with Budweiser or whatever it might be. So you are explicitly telling the audience that this is a branded piece of content. But the point being, as I say, I see this as a good thing, because actually the content should be so strong that it deserves to be in your feed.
And has it affected the effectiveness of that?
So when we first started, I think the fear was that Facebook would start penalising you for distributing that branded content because it was an ad. They treat it as an ad. And I think that was our fear, and actually what transpired was that good content will move and will travel and will hit your audience regardless of whether there is a brand attached to it. And that for us is the most important thing. And those understanding then for us, the content that works and hits those sweet spots that really finds those niche audiences. For us, it's not about finding mass market, it's not about finding everyone. It's about finding these pockets of interest and whatever it might be that allows us to actually really move that sort of brand message.
Okay, so let's look specifically at that sort of content marketing where Facebook treats it as an ad. I'm guessing you pay them for that distribution.
So yeah, so we did a bit of both.
So Sam, as a smaller business, if we're saying okay, content marketing might take us a little bit further away from specific action, and then now you're going to increased awareness means that it's slightly less effective, but we have to pay to get that distributed. Does that make it still useful for a small brand, or does it just price it out?
I just think you've got to do something different completely, because firstly we're a starter brand, we're B2B, so it makes it slightly different. But I think there's a lot to be done with user-generated content for startups rather than just relying on your own team. Like, I'm a team of one, so it's very hard for me to sort of do like all of the comms and all of the copywriting. I think that if you just find other people that have got the same tone of voice, that you can sort of snatch them, influencers or other copywriters, and say, do you want to help us spread the message, then that's another way that you can get the story told if you're a small business anyway.
Who here suggests or would agree with the fact that user-generated content is the most effective form of content for your brand? Okay, pretty strong. We actually at Hopper, we surveyed almost all of our members. We had about 4,000 responses from brands, and 83% said user-generated content was by far the most effective content that they had. Craig, do you have any thoughts on this in terms of how audience awareness changes the value of content marketing?
I think the regulation and the transparency is, on the whole, is a good thing, linked to what Nick was saying. However, at the same time, I think it is a slight shame in terms of the opportunity that brands can actually use content marketing for. So there's a fantastic content marketing campaign that I've seen, which it was done in France, and it was an influencer campaign where essentially there was a very attractive French lady who essentially amassed loads and loads of followers over a period. And basically she was constantly posting images of her travelling around with friends, and you're kind of wrapped up in this amazing life that this lady had. It was absolutely brilliant. However, what people didn't start to realise is actually in every single one of her posts there was a drink in there. And as a result, at the end of the campaign, there was a grand reveal, and it was basically, this is all, you've liked my addiction, essentially. You've been following me, you've been sharing, you've been liking all these posts that I've done, but actually I have a serious problem that people didn't really realise. Now obviously that's extremely subtle, and then the juxtaposition of that is actually it comes out and is completely different. And I think when you have the kind of the regulation and less transparent and more transparency, effective campaigns like that become less possible, because essentially you know from the outset that that's going to happen, and it's actually a branded piece of messaging.
Okay. Nice. I want to cover a few other challenges specifically around ad block and the costs and the value of that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just move on to onto future, and I actually want to open up the questions from you guys. So if anybody else cares about ad block, then I also do. So I'll leave that the question up to you. I want to look into what content marketing looks like in 2020 and beyond, if we can. Interestingly, Forbes have just announced their 2018 predictions, marketing predictions. One of them, and we can blue or yellow this, was they said traditional ad campaigns will die in 2018. What do we think? Sharp intake of breath from Craig on the end there. Yeah, I also agree with you guys. They also said that CMOs will finally get value from social media. We'll finally see the value and start getting it. Okay, an optimistic bunch. I think you're a content marketer, like painfully putting that up, saying that you don't think it's going to happen. Okay, so what will content look like? I don't particularly believe in any of them, but what will content marketing look like in 2020?
I personally think we're going to start seeing content marketing popping up on every client brief, and I think the key challenge for us is defining the role of content within that brief and the objectives of that brief. But I think traditional forms of marketing, we should be slightly wary of the use of those in terms of actually the measurement and the measurement of effectiveness and return on investment of content marketing, as Nick was saying earlier, will get more and more clever as you can measure more things and its impact on brand preference, brand awareness and conversion. So I think it's going to play a much bigger role in all agency responses, and interestingly I think we will actually have to invite the publishers in more in regards to how we create that content and how we distribute that, because they own their platforms, they are the experts on that. So it's a completely different subject, but I think agency, client, publisher relationships, we're all going to have to start playing ball a level more.
Interesting. Do we agree with that? You get nods, not colours, but that works. Sam, 2020, what does content marketing look like?
I think everybody will start sending handwritten notes. We've actually started to do something not just with our clients but with ourselves, because we can't really send a newsletter, being people are saying handwritten notes have got 100% open rate over newsletters. So we started doing campaigns where we actually look at people that are subscribing to us, and when they subscribe we send them a handwritten note, and we tend to see that that's starting to get shared, and therefore we're like passing that information over to our clients. So we're starting the digital conversation off by doing something human and physical. So I think, a lot of companies are starting to do that with us, so I'm guessing that might be going that way. I also think that Instagram stories will just continue to grow, and YouTube will start to have a vertical video screen, which I really think they should just get on with.
Big one. Do we think YouTube will start to have a vertical video stream? Amador over there, Andal, that's Tim Hopper, way up there with the Blues. Okay. No one's confident in this because they're holding it here rather than there. Nick, thank you, Sam. What does content look like in 2020? Content marketing.
So I think that
it's a great way to buy time.
Yeah.
Because you guys have an interesting setup with the distributed network in terms of being slightly different to other publishers.
Yeah, so I guess as a publisher, you have a slightly different view and relationship with your platforms. As Craig sort of talks about agencies and publishers and brands who are working more closely together, we as a publisher are now expected to work a lot more closely with our platforms. I think gone are the days when, or I say gone are the days, still happens, where people will go to their browser and they will type in Buzzfeed.com and they will go and read all of our content and it will be great. But in reality, people are consuming content on their social networks now and through that sort of distributed network. So publishers have always been held accountable for how many uniques they can get to their website. When we walk into a pitch, one of the first questions we get is, well, how many uniques do you have? Because generally that is a third-party verified metric by Comscore who can allow you to actually gear you up versus The Guardian or versus Lad Bible or whoever it might be. But in reality, content is moving into this distributed network where people aren't going to their browser and typing in a website and consuming content. They're actually consuming that natively on the social platforms that they feel comfortable in. So as such, for me, there's been a lot of hesitancy with publishers to move all of their content to their distributed networks based on the fact that they can't monetize it in the same way that they would if they were on their website. They can't run their premium display banners and all of this great stuff. But for me, what I've experienced at Buzzfeed is that measuring publishers based on their uniques is not necessarily the strongest way to actually to measure a publisher. And actually the strength of your distributed network, i.e. how many tasties can you build, how can you build out these Facebook pages and these channels that live on YouTube or Instagram or wherever it might be, that not only you can build an organic audience through really strong content, but you can then monetize, because that's the hardest part. And now we're seeing a huge revenue stream coming from video that is completely distributed away from our website. So it allows us to actually fund that and then to actually grow and develop that. So yeah, I guess for me as a publisher, you're going to see a lot more content being distributed onto these platforms, but at the same time, you need those platforms to work with you. I think there's been a lot of feedback negatively about instant articles on Facebook and the return that they're giving to publishers. And I think that actually it should be on the platforms as well to really work closely and help everyone monetize that content.
There was a lot there, but there was also a lot of nods. No, it's more that I just can't ask it as a question, but do we agree with Nick? Look at that, you popular boy. So actually there's a couple other things, so these are all really interesting predictions. The other things that we've kind of seen was there's a bit of a trend at the moment for people starting to charge for their content, but it's still classed as content marketing. If somebody's charging for the content, is that content marketing or is that a product? I've asked you a question that you can't tell me. If you charge for content, is that still content? Oh, charging for content is still content marketing. Okay, mix, maybe blue. Yeah, it's tough. So Casper mattress. Do you know Casper mattress? One of the big mattress disruptors, the same as Eve and the rest of them. They've done a huge content marketing play, but they've just announced that they're scrapping all of that and producing a physical $12 a quarter issue called Woolly. But they're saying that is their big content marketing play because they give it away free for people buying, and then actually they can sell it for $12. Also, The Guardian have now said that their revenue has exceeded by subscriptions than anything else, and they're really banking on the fact that millennials will pay for content as a sign of a sign of success and trust and everything, and therefore it means that people have bought in.
I don't agree with that.
Okay, we'll come to that. Well, they say that actually it's a really, if they pay for it, then they consume it and adore it more, that they'll be more driven to action based on the content they're consuming.
Yeah, no, I think...
Get this guy a yellow card.
Yeah. No, I think that the challenge is that journalism has been commoditized through social. And so actually there is more onus now on the user to make a decision as to whether they trust the source more than ever, right? So I think that doing what you've described and setting up a subscription and putting up paywalls and things like that can work in the short term. For me, that is not a long-term strategy that I think will work, based on the fact that their growth, and actually when you look at uniques, as we talk about uniques and Comscore, it's fairly flat across any publisher in the UK. Your on-sites are very flat. All of your growth is in your distributed network. So the sooner you can monetize that and drive value there, for me, that's your long-term strategy.
Long-term strategy is in your distributed network. Blue or yellow? First one's up a yellow, some unsures. That's mixed. Interesting point. Okay, guys, there's so many other things that I'd love to discuss, but actually I kind of want you guys to discuss more. So, we're going to do about 15 minutes. Actually, no, we've probably got about 20 minutes of Q&A, and then we've got loads more drink, loads more nibbles, and we'll be around up until 9 o'clock. So, who would like to start with a question for our fantastic panel? Right at the back. Okay.
Hi. So if content marketing is not the future of digital marketing, what would it be? And I ask that because I understand that to build authority, build transparency is the key to be relevant in your area, in your market. But in our over-communicating society, and we are becoming less sensible with the information you consume. So I came here with an answer for no, content marketing is not the future, but at the same time now I understand that content marketing can be everything. So yeah, I think this is the question. If it's not the not the future, what would be?
Great question.
Yeah.
Things like that. So generous.
Sounds quite answer.
I actually think building communities is like having people relate to your conversation and relate to each other and be part of something together. I think that's the other way of doing it. If it's not content. I mean, content starts the conversation and gets you across the net and gives you something to share with each other. But if there's a way you can get people into a community, that's the next way that you could build that trust.
No, I would have it back.
Yeah, that's something to think about. I'd agree with that. I think that I think brands have a lot of work to do to build trust with their customers, and building communities is a really good opportunity to do that. And I think that the sooner that brands can get closer to their communities in an authentic, relatable way, the better it's going to be for the brand, not just in terms of getting the awareness out there, but understanding what their audience is talking about. So it doesn't necessarily need to be through content marketing. There are a number of other ways that you can do that, but I think where we are today, I think content marketing is a really strong place for that.
Yeah, not forgetting that like Instagram, I see Instagram as a community, and my followers are my community, and I've got a duty to give them stuff that's going to entertain and inform them, or just.
So we'll ask that one, and we've not asked the big question, which obviously we're coming to. If content marketing isn't the future of digital marketing, then building communities could be. Yellow or blue? Okay. That's the first one that people have done 2 on, which is good. Okay, we're going to go for more questions. Yes, I'm coming to you.
Hi. So we're speaking about the future of content marketing in terms of distribution and stuff like that. What forms will that take? Is it video? Is it written? What's the future in terms of what forms it'll take?
Okay, personally, video, definitely.
I'd agree with video, and I think it's you see how quickly content marketing is changing, even with the advice now that in all content marketing you should have subtitles, for example. That wasn't around a year ago. I think the thing for me is bite-sized pieces of content, because what you're finding is there's a massive influx of new competitors in all categories, all industries, and as a result, people are always fighting for people's time and attention, and as a result, I think short content in the form of video will be the future.
Instagram's like the new Tinder, isn't it, for content? Just swipe, and take 5 minutes.
It's also like the new Tinder. A lot of people do use it for dating.
Oh, I heard an echo then.
That's just what I was thinking in my head. I would agree as well, right? Like, video is video, like, same way that everyone saw pictures that mobile is the future. Like, we know this is the case, right? It's nothing new, but I think, sort of talking a bit to Craig's point, I think the actual format of that video is perhaps the most important thing that might change, and the length of it, and actually what people do with it. I think that Snapchat have done some really interesting things with augmented reality and bringing brands into that and actually creating an environment that you are comfortable sharing with your friend, but it just so happens there's a branded banner above it that, whatever it might be. So I think that video is video, but there are some really interesting formats that are coming out of that as well. You talk about 360 video, you talk about AR, VR, there's a lot of really interesting buzzwords that people throw around, but it is, you're right, it is driving engagement beyond someone just, because you could talk about video like TV. It's been around for a while, it's nothing new, but I think that the way that you interact with that video is what is changing.
Thank you very much.
I think podcasts also are growing very, very quickly. They're keeping the retention for longer as well, especially in London when you've got the commute and you need to be entertained without having to watch something.
You had a question, you still? Yeah.
Which social platforms do you think are the least saturated but have the highest potential for the future?
Great question.
I would argue that Snapchat is not that saturated. I think that I'm personally a huge advocate of Snapchat, and I think that they've had fairly mixed press, is probably a nice way to put it, in the last 6 to 12 months. But from a content perspective, we have seen huge opportunities there. And the reason for that is what we're seeing is this like, something we've experienced is what we're talking about is sort of platform elasticity, where you've gone from this stage where every brand needed to be on every single social platform. They didn't know why they needed to be there, but they needed to be there. And you know, that's only 3 or 4 years ago. Everyone was all over the platforms, and you know, you had Vine, which now is dead. But at the time, it seemed pretty relevant. But now you've sort of shrunk, and you've got to this point where people talk about the duopoly, and they talk about actually, you know, a lot of our activity and our investment goes into these 2 platforms. I feel now, and what I've seen from certain agencies that I've spoken to, that there is, you know, buyers are being incentivized to move away from the duopoly. So you've almost got to this stage where you've shrunk, and now you're talking really mainly about YouTube and Facebook and maybe Instagram as well. And now actually it's growing back out again. And I think that is when you're going to start hearing more about Snapchat becoming more prevalent, because you're then not looking for reach. You know, previously people went to social networks to find reach, but actually I think that we've evolved and we're thinking more about engaged users now.
The big question is, do you think Snapchat will survive the shift in market in order to get there?
Yeah, I do. I think that, as I've kind of said, I think that previously we approached social networks with how do we reach as many people as possible, as cheaply as possible. And Facebook is very good at doing that. But in reality, I think now we're getting to a stage where reach is easy. Anyone can get impressions. But if you want an engaged user that you can actually communicate with on that one-to-one basis, I think Snapchat is a very good platform to do that.
Great. On your cards, Snapchat is here for the future, blue or yellow? Oh, a lot of yellows.
So Snapchat yellow.
You're just yellow for everything.
Well, I mean, Snapchat, I missed their figures massively. I know this doesn't always work, but their share price slumped by 18%, just gone. About 10% have just taken 10% of them.
Yeah,
so,
but I think that's the challenge as well, right? Is that Snapchat, the expectation in market is now Facebook, right? Facebook, when Facebook first IPO'd, you know, they were nowhere near what they are and what Snapchat is today. So in reality, the expectation has been set that you're a social network. You know, we'll let you, as soon as we open up our API, let you start buying media through that. There is a very high expectation. The bar is very high. So actually, I think give Snapchat 6 to 12 months, and I think they'll really start to prove a lot of value.
Their user growth has slowed to 2.4% monthly growth, which actually everybody's looking really down on, but still, it's still growth. Right?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? Is everyone compares it. They say, well, you know, Instagram's bigger and Instagram's grown, and actually, Snapchat started the vertical video format, but Instagram have really brought it to the mass market. But for me, again, that goes back to the point. I'm not trying to reach everyone. I'm just trying to reach a really engaged user base, and actually, you know, there's an eMarketer report that came out a couple of months ago that said that in Q1 next year, it's going to be the first time that there will be more 13 to 18-year-olds on Snapchat than there is on Facebook and Instagram. And so whilst that's a small signal, for us, that has huge potential impact, because that is your emerging market, that is your growing audience base, and they are leveraging Snapchat. Whether or not as a media buyer, I think it's the most effective way to deliver a message, is where that growing audience is coming from.
Thank you very much. More questions? Yes, I'm coming to you and then to you.
Yeah.
You can take that. You do it.
Thank you. My question is, how do you manage taking calculated risks with content marketing and kind of treading into new territory while at the same time maintaining the reputation of your brand and not putting that into jeopardy?
Can you give us an example?
So I think you mentioned a little bit how you kind of have to, a lot of content marketing comes from the R&D budget and just kind of trying new things, but if you've been really working hard as an organization to build a very stable brand and recognizable, not kind of going completely to the left field and trying something new that might turn off your target audience.
I mean, I think you'll just know very quickly if it doesn't work or if it's offended them or something. I mean, I think it's just common sense as well, like don't do something offensive, but like always try something new. Like at the end of the day, audiences do get bored very quickly, so as long as you can keep the same like tone of voice and the same themes running through and keep the conversations going, then I don't think there's anything wrong with trying new topics, but it's quite hard without knowing what exactly you're referring to, like what type of content.
Sure. So the organization that I work for, we support women survivors of war. So they're always our number one kind of.
Okay.
We always want to make sure that we're sharing our stories in a very dignified way.
Sure.
So
again, like I keep coming back to community, but it's a really good way to try content out. like if you've got a trusted community that are like that you trust to give you a good opinion, Facebook for me, that's one last resource that I think I can get from testing content and seeing if the conversation works. And if it does, then bring it out into social in a way that you see fit.
To that point, I think you should treat it as another part of your marketing mix, and where you would test a TV ad, you should also be testing that content. Just because content could be slightly quicker, you could distribute it quicker, that doesn't mean that it should be less considered. And as a result, testing, research, launching on a small sample and testing and learning and innovating, you should treat it as a proper channel.
I think some people that have done it really well actually, whether it be blog on the very basic form of content, split test everything. And I know a lot of best practices, people will actually put tweets out with the topic, the subject titles, and just see what tweets got more engagement and say, okay, I'm going to build more content around this and A/B test. And I mean, it's amazing to hear that Buzzfeed, you were saying you test 600 times a day with new content, but obviously with small organisations it's hard to do. So it's almost leveraging. Really great point, thank you. Your question?
Do you think it's a good idea for a brand, anyone trying to sell products, essentially try and separate channels where you build your audience, completely unbranded, nothing, completely free, from the channels where you do then offer something? Example, you know, I do a blog, there's nothing paid on there, but then I take you somewhere else where I do try and sell you something. Or is it really all about trust and you know, content being relatable and you can just put it all together? And then linked to that question, what do you think about social networks such as Reddit, where they really try and do everything to avoid any branded content, and should you be putting any efforts in there or just forget it altogether?
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
I can have a go.
Yeah.
I can have a go.
What an idea.
So your first question was around whether there is value in associating your established brand to these other properties that you're building. So we actually try and avoid that, to be honest. We will try and build these silo pockets of communities that you know, we don't necessarily need them to be particularly affiliated with Buzzfeed. We actually see a lot of value in doing that. As I've said, you know, Tasty's a good example. Bring Me is a travel one. Nifty, you know, do a lot of DIY content. And rarely in that distribution are we saying this is a Buzzfeed channel. Because actually the point is we don't want to keep replicating that audience across our different channels. We want to build these unique, diversified audiences so that actually, coming back to the point that I made about growing your distributed network, you're able to do that in a deduped way that allows you to have this huge reach and allows you to say, well, you know, if we work with a B&Q, right, and maybe B&Q doesn't necessarily work with Buzzfeed, but it might work with Nifty, which is our DIY channel. So suddenly it allows us to actually attach brands into these verticals and into these sort of sub-brands without that direct connection. And your second question was? Reddit.
Reddit, yellow or blue whilst Nick's thinking. Do we, Reddit is good for marketing. Oh, lots of yellow heads.
I think Reddit is a really interesting one because it's built on community.
Yeah.
And really, I don't think it's gone past that. You know, I think that they've been so controlling over that interface and over that platform. They're very reluctant to open up to, you know, certain formats and certain brands. And actually, like, I think you have to respect that. You know, I think that what they're doing is really interesting. I think that their challenge is going to be monetization. You know, I think that ultimately you will get to the point where you are having to diversify your revenue opportunities. And you know, with Reddit, I think that whilst they have a really strong community right now, I think it's really interesting to look at how they can start to monetize that.
I'm just coming over to you, and then you. Just a quick note on Reddit. James, one of the co-founders of Hopper HQ, did something actually very authentic on Reddit, just genuinely trying to get involved into the community. And I'm sure he'll be okay with me saying that he got abused on Reddit. And he fed the trolls without meaning to feed the trolls, but I think it's just if people see it as something else, then it's a downward spiral. Over to you.
Yeah, I'm a co-founder of a startup fashion brand, and obviously wanting to get into content marketing. You talk a lot about building communities, Have you got any advice and tips of how to build a community pretty much from scratch if you haven't got the foundations as a large brand?
It's all about start with your friends and start, like what I did with one brand was we started a community on Instagram and Facebook and drove the content from Instagram to the Facebook group and then put our blogging content in the group in a way that opened a conversation up. So as many questions as you can think of that you can ask your community. People are dying to share stuff. So rather than sit there and think, what can I give to them? Go and find out, ask them what content they want, ask them what problems they face with whatever topics you want to cover in fashion, and then just see what they've got to say. And if it's something that's popular, run with that and do a bit more of that.
And would you do that on like posts, or would you do it on your like stories, or a mixture of the two?
I did it in the Facebook community because it gets the thread going so everyone else can see what the other person said and they can reply to each other. I do think there's probably a way of linking it in with stories or opening at least the question to stories and then asking people to comment on then the next Instagram post if you wanted to do an open community. But I don't know, I was promoting sort of, we were talking about IBS, so ours was more trusted because of a closed community. But if it's something like fashion, it probably might work better on Instagram where people are happy to talk about it.
And Austin, you had a question? Is that so?
Did you have something to say?
Yeah, I was going to build on that as well. I also wouldn't devalue the value of offline marketing as well, because I know a guy who's currently setting up a wine distribution company. And it's a subscription service, and actually what he's finding is the most successful way of building his digital community is essentially he's doing wine tastings, and these are all physical offline channels that he's using, but when he's talking to people, and I went to a wine tasting he did the other day, he was talking about the benefits of me joining his community. I would never have been exposed to that, and had I not actually gone to the physical manifestation of his activity. So I would actually say within the overall consumer journey, and I would always talk journeys, it's consider the role of different things and then also how can you link those as well.
There was a bit of discussion around the role content marketing plays in acquisition and awareness, but what role do you see it playing in retention and building loyalty?
I think that I actually think it's a really good opportunity to learn more about your audience. I think that there's a lot that's invested into acquiring that customer, be it online, offline, wherever it might be. But actually, you're right. I think that the renewal and actually retaining that customer can often be just as tough. And I think that content and social really gives you that opportunity to get that feedback and to understand actually, trying different types of content, trying different images on your Instagram to actually see which sort of product types are really popping, and using that as your R&D. As I said, people view content marketing from a brand perspective as being, paying for it in this R&D media plan. But actually, for the brand itself, I think it's a really good opportunity to understand more about your audience as well, and actually to feed that back into your product strategy. And I think that platforms like Facebook do a really good. I think it's a really good opportunity for you to build that audience and retain that audience. I think gone are the days when people think about fans and things like that, but actually people consuming content often far outweighs actually the number of fans that you have on your page or followers you have on Instagram. So they are building opportunities for you to better retain those audiences.
What's something to add to that actually? Can I add
Yeah,
to that?
cool. Yeah.
I think just keep the conversation going as well. Like don't just expect it to be a one-way conversation either way. Like if they interact with you or they like your stuff, talk to them more, go and comment on their stuff, like people always remember how you made them feel. So if you make them feel good, they'll remember you and they'll tend to stick with you for longer.
I'm going to ask that out to the audience. So the point was content marketing can be as good for retention as it can be for brand awareness and tactical sales. Yeah, really strong yeses on that. I'm coming to another question. If we do two more in the room, and we've got quite a lot of people on YouTube who are asking questions as well. Did someone have the hand up in the middle? Yes, I'll come to you. I'll talk whilst we're doing this. We actually started doing a trending mailer, which was essentially just we tell everyone what the trends are for the next week in terms of hashtags on social media and fill people in with news. And it was actually pretty much content marketing, but what we ended up finding it being was it actually became a really core part of our product. So people use it within Hopper now to say, okay, this is what's going to trend this week, and this is the content how I produce. So I'm a massive advocate of retention as well.
Don't take this the wrong way, but have content pieces like the top 10 list and that, have they lost their effect? And is there a way to use that kind of content in a different way that's not the top 10 things you should do with your phone or something?
I think that might be directed at me. Yeah, so actually, fun fact, don't use an even number when you're making a list. We actually found that when you make lists with obscure numbers, people are more likely to click through. So that would be the first thing.
Is it because they're not as common? So
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, like you're not rounding it up.
Yeah, 5 and 10 have been really done a lot, so they're changing it up.
No, yeah, I would say that, yeah.
The answer to that can't be just...
No, I'm not.
Numbers.
That was just, don't worry, there's more. That just gave me time to think about it. Use cats, quizzes, all that stuff's good. No, so, yeah, I mean, a list is a list, right? I think the purpose of a list and the format of a list, I didn't think I'd be talking about lists tonight, is that, you know, it's a really interesting way to condense a lot of information into something that is short form, right? And so if you think about that evolution from long form to short form, I think content has done a pretty good job of going from long form to short form. There are still places where long form can play, but with the short attention span that a lot of us have, we've had to shorten a lot of that content. Lists are a very good way of doing that. Video, Snapchat, Instagram, under 10 seconds, it's a very strong opportunity. And what we're actually seeing is pivoting out, I can't believe I just said pivot, lists, so written lists, into video. So, and you'll often see that across Facebook as well, is people are taking the concept of a list, but actually moving it into a different format. So whether that is, 6 great things to do, I'll use an even number, 7 great things to do in Birmingham this weekend, and it will actually be a video, and actually that is still a list format, but it's moved towards, an area and a channel that is far more engaging, but also allows you to learn a lot more about your audience. So I don't think lists are going anywhere. I just think that they're evolving into these new formats that actually are driven by the platforms. They're driven by Snapchat and Instagram. I think if we had our way, people would keep coming back to Buzzfeed.com and reading our lists. But in reality, they're consuming those pieces of content on their social network. So, yeah, it's had to evolve, and I don't think it's going anywhere.
I actually think people really need to know how long something's going to take them. So, as in Uber's great because it tells you how long the taxi's going to take. It's not actually creating another solution other than keeping you entertained, watching the car, it's coming closer. You know that there's going to be 10 or 7 things that you're going to be reading, and it's not going to be long form content, whether it's video or blogging.
Nice. We're going to do one more question in the room. Okay, 2. We'll do this one over here.
Okay, so as more and more brands are kind of jumping on board with content marketing, and you're getting kind of this influx of, as well, brands failing at it quite epically, and you're getting a flood of it on Instagram, how far can it actually stretch? And at what point does content marketing become our new banner ads, essentially? You're so aware of it, it just becomes, you know exactly what it is. It's our banner ad of the future.
What a quote. Whilst these guys are thinking, content marketing is the banner ad of the future. Red, not red, blue or yellow? Okay, that was a slow one. Yeah, not everyone likes yellow today. Okay, great.
I think it's something that marketers should definitely try and avoid as much as possible. And the way I personally think to do that is make sure that the content you're producing really does have a genuine purpose in terms of, is it relevant to me? Is it interesting? Is it entertaining? Is it informing? Because if it actually has a purpose and the audience are getting something out of it, they're not going to switch off to it as banner ads have, as they have to banner ads, which is kind of being resurgent now, however, as it becomes hyper-targeted. But I think as long as they're getting benefit out of the content that they're producing, then there will always be a role for it.
Great. Do you have something? Okay, cool. And we'll do one last question. And I thought we're going to do 2 quick ones from YouTube, just because we've got so many people that we don't want them to think that we don't love them. So over to you.
So when it comes to video content on Facebook, would you now say that any other format rather than Square is pointless or at least less effective?
Yeah, well, I actually think Instagram have challenged that, and Snapchat, because everything was just, rectangle for ages, and that was just how you thought of it, and you had to film it that way around. And now, weirdly, now it's gone vertical, I want everything to be able to display my Instagram stories, so I want to be able to upload it to a blog, therefore I need to put it on YouTube, but they don't do that. So I think, never say never, like the phone is currently square, so it works for that, but Instagram's thrown my theory out the window.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, because we've done, when we create video content now, we create it in those 3 formats. There is an expectation in market that if you produce a piece of video content, that you are producing it for square, for vertical, and for horizontal, and that is driven a lot by the platforms. But we're also seeing performance differ drastically across those. And actually, I think Tasty is a really good example of why square works so well. And it's simple, right? The recipe for Tasty was that it is short form, right? I almost got away with that. It's short form, so it's under 60 seconds. You don't need sound to watch it. Everything is up on screen, and it's square. And people think, square is square, but it takes up more screen on your phone. The real estate that you get from a square video is far different to what you get with a horizontal video. So it's actually pretty simple. And so, as a result, as you're saying, now you're seeing a lot more social video going down this square route. And for me, horizontal lives on YouTube.
I mean, if you, a futurologist scared the hell out of me, because she showed us she predicted the future with loads of research they'd done, and the fact that if you'd worn any sort of glasses at some point in your life and you'd been on social and were used to gamifying your life, you could just put glasses on in the future and you'd see everything. So we could be on a beach right now in Hopper whilst you're sat on the commute, and you could feel like you could just look around the room or walk around the room and talk to people. So who knows, maybe it's going to be
Square's not going to work for that,
virtual.
Okay. Does anyone have a burning question that they'll go home disappointed if they haven't asked? That's good, thank you. So we're going to go to Marvin on YouTube. Do you have an optimal day and time to post different types of content, and how does this affect marketing?
London-based stuff, definitely in the morning and in the evening, because people are on the commute, and now there's Wi-Fi on the commute. I find that a lot of people interact during those times, not on their lunch breaks, but for us.
I think you always have to go back to your audience insight in terms of you have to understand your audience to the detail in terms of when are they most likely to consume that content, when are they most likely to take notice of that content, when they can actually be impacted by that content. So it's all about audience understanding.
Great. I think also that we don't know where Marvin is because he's on YouTube, so he could be anywhere. But if you are marketing in London,
there at home,
Marvin,
holding up
then
the
go
red,
for the morning.
and
we've got one other question from Somo. What role do you see paid media fitting into content marketing mix as marketing organisations are continually looking to drive results?
I do actually think more influencers and content creators will start getting paid more, because people are realising they're more creative than they think, and they're actually producing really good quality stuff. So that's sort of what I think.
Yeah, I think that it's something that we think about quite a lot. BuzzFeed is organic versus paid. There is a huge amount of value, and brands will pay for us to post their content organically on our Facebook pages, which is crazy. But the reason for that is the association with the page and with the property. But in reality, I'm a huge, somewhat a huge fan of paid media, in the sense that it allows you to tap into a very specific audience. So when we work with brands, when we work with, on very specific campaigns, organic media is great and it's very good for learning and testing and that kind of thing. But if you want to reach a very specific audience, and if you actually want to tap into a certain behavior, like someone has watched a cocktail video on Tasty in the last 24 hours, very hard to do that via organic distribution. So actually there is a really strong play there for paid, and actually when you start talking about verification, viewability, that is a lot easier via paid media. Moat is very closely aligned with paid distribution, less so with organic. So actually, there is I think there's a growing need for that paid distribution.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Marvin and Simon. And we have other questions which I'm going to try and answer in the comments on YouTube later, if that's okay. So guys, we're coming to the question of the evening. Before we do, can we just have some parting words of wisdom, advice, if somebody's looking to get into content marketing, to get better at content marketing, decide whether it's worthwhile. What, from your perspective, what can you leave people with?
So mainly cats.
Yeah.
Like cats always works.
The 5 top looking cats.
Yeah, right, odd number. No, I would say short form content, I would say, square video, vertical video, testing those kinds of things, and we've touched on it loads of times, but community, relatability, authenticity, actually speaking to your audience, and not trying to sort of preach towards them.
Great, thank you. I feel like you stole everyone else's buzzword.
Yeah, what he said. I agree, and I think that if you can just stand out in whatever way you can, like go against the grain a little bit. So if you're on Instagram, but you can start a different conversation, or you can actually speak back to those people rather than it being a one-way, that's the best thing. Keep the conversation going.
I would actually say just treat it as you would any other marketing channel or communications platform. You have to really, really define what the role of content marketing is doing within your marketing plan. Because if you just do it to tick a box that, yes, we're doing content marketing, it's inevitably going to fail because you're doing it for the wrong reasons. I think you have to approach it as you would everything else. It has to have a strategic fit.
Craig, you've got the mic, so you can start. Content marketing is the future of digital marketing. Blue or yellow? Blues are green.
I'm going to go for a mix.
No,
I have to choose. Okay, it's going to play a massive role.
Yes, thank you very much. Sam, content marketing is the future of digital marketing.
Yeah, humbly. Never
Amazing.
die.
I bet
Just
you're
get
really
ready
saying
to
that, yeah. Nick?
You can't really come on here and say no, can you? You have to say yes. No, I think yes, but in the sense that it is not the be all and end all.
That's why we gave you cards. And
Sorry, blue, yes.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, content marketing is the future of digital marketing. We have almost all blues, a few
You're
mixes,
almost converted.
2 yellows, and one of them's from Team Hopper. I think I was just doing that to get my attention. Guys, thank you so much. Can we have a massive round of applause for our panel, Nick, Sam and Craig. We also have one last thing that you guys can join us. We actually thought you guys have come to spend your Tuesday with us, so we want to give something a little bit back to you. On the back of your name badges, everybody has a number. We tried to print them and got them misaligned, so Jack's actually painstakingly written all the numbers on. We also have some camera kits to give away and a year's worth of Hopper, so Instagram scheduling. So Nick, if you could start and pull out a number for the camera kit number 1. So if you could look at the number on the back of your name badge, we might have to put it a couple of times because there's also name badges that haven't arrived, but more for them.
It's mine.
115.
What have we got? We got one, yeah! We've got a little camera kit with a tripod and lenses and stuff. What was your name? Rebecca, congratulations, Rebecca. And finally, Sam, you can pull this. We have another camera kit and a year's worth of Hopper subscription.
110.
Oh,
it's 2 away from my own.
Are you in the room? No, okay, Craig, we can pull again.
156.
156. Come on, we can go again. We can go again. We're going to give you a 5-second rule. Right, Nick, off you go.
139. Winner!
Well done, Lydia, thank you. Yeah, no, I haven't checked, but I'm going to trust you. So also, in a lovely tie that actually wasn't intentional, if you like winning things and you're working in social media, we've launched a rather silly but actually quite fun Instagrammies. It's launched today. Nominations have opened up until just Sunday. We have ridiculous topics 10 categories about the best social media post, best social media campaign. Really, really simple. If you head over to hopperhq.com/Instagram, you can nominate you or somebody else or a colleague or just a post that you think is interesting. We're actually then going to put it up to public vote, and the people who win are going to win some amazing Instagrammy trophies made by James in the back there. So don't take that lightly. Thank you. So yeah, do join that. It'll be great just to see what you guys think is amazing, because that's basically what we're interested in at the moment. And that brings us very neatly to the end of Is Content Marketing the Future of Marketing? Thanks once again to the amazing panel and to all of you in the audience. We have to be out of here around 9, but there's still more drink, there's still more snacks, there's still everybody in the room, including our panellists, who will have one more big round of applause. And thank you all very much for joining us, and I hope to see you all